Hey everyone, welcome to the Engage and Quit podcast, a resource designed to build substantive disciples for the local church. I have with me two pastors from Lighthouse Church here in Madison, Stephanie and Marcio. I'm going to have you guys just introduce yourself in just a second. And then also Abby Bernard is part of High Point Church, and she's going to be here like asking additional questions and helping out with this interview. So I'd love to jump right in. Would you guys sort of just identify yourselves, like introduce yourselves and like what you do at Lighthouse, maybe how long you've been in the region?
Yeah, so my name is Marcio Sierra, and I am one of the pastors here at Lighthouse Church. I was born and raised in Honduras, and I actually immigrated to the United States when I was 15 years old. I came here because my father got a scholarship to go to get his PhD at the University of Wisconsin. So that's how we came to the United States, and that's my story as an immigrant. Became a member of Lighthouse Church, got involved with Lighthouse Church, and then I became the youth leader. Then I became the youth pastor back in 2002. And in 2012, I became the senior pastor at Lighthouse.
And you went to high school here in Madison?
Yes, so I went to high school. I was 15 when I came to Madison. I didn't speak any English. And I went to West High School, graduated from West, and that's my story. So I was one of those kids that when I went to high school, didn't speak the language. So I went and sat with a group of Hispanic kids, and I was part of the ESL program. So my experience was very similar to the typical immigrant kid who comes here, as a teenager.
Great. How about you, Stephanie?
So I'm Stephanie Avila, and I'm the executive pastor at Lighthouse Church. I grew up at Lighthouse Church. I was in Pastor Marcio's youth group. My family is from Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. And so I was born in Madison, but when I was 2, my family moved back to Guadalajara. Okay. And so I was raised there till about 9. And then at the age of 9, we returned back to Madison. And I've been here ever since. Learning the language as a young child. So we have a lot of children that we meet that come to Lighthouse. And I'm able to share my story and encourage them in that way, because it can be really hard and scary to be in a new place. And some of these kids were excelling in school, and not knowing the language is really hard. So anyway, I'll share more about that in a little bit. But that's my story. And you have a daughter.
My daughter's age, they play against each other in basketball.
Yes, so right? I have 2 daughters. Yeah, I have, so my daughter Abby is 12 and she's a 7th grader. And then my daughter Belen is 13 and she's an 8th grader at Lighthouse.
Oh, nice. Okay, well, those are nice. They're close together. That's
great. They are,
yes. Okay, great. Abby, would you introduce yourself too so people know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Abby Bernard. I've been I've been attending High Point Church for almost 14 years. A member slightly less, and I'm a registered nurse and work at St. Mary's. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because I am of Latino heritage. My grandma is from Puerto Rico, and I work with a lot of diverse people groups as a nurse, and so get to talk to a lot of coworkers and patients, and they have just expressed a lot of fears to me on this topic, and so it's something that I'm really passionate about.
Do you speak Spanish?
A little bit, very poorly, but right. I try.
Yeah, okay, so let me set this up a little bit and so we can get to you guys. So a few weeks ago, I did a podcast when there were like a lot of protests and stuff happening, and ICE was in Minneapolis, and there was a lot of controversy around that. And I kind of worked from like protests backwards. And I had some people, including Abby, say, hey, for a lot of people, this starts with like who is getting arrested and who's afraid and how they feel and how lots of people feel. This is millions of people we're talking about. It'd be great if we had like a pastoral response that started from the ground forward. And I was like, yeah, that's really true. That's correct. That's right. And so we talked a little bit about that, and we invited you guys to come here partly to talk about that. So we wanted to do kind of like, what are you seeing in people's lives? What's like on the ground? Like, because sometimes the news, you don't know what's right. You guys are working with people who this is their life. They're in your organization institutions. We want to hear what you're hearing. Secondly, how are you reflecting on this personally as Christian leaders and as Christians? And then third, what are you teaching? How are you pastoring people in this thing? So first, so I'll ask that first question, then you can jump in with any follow-ups, okay? So first is like, what are you seeing? Like, what can people in our church know about, like in Latino churches, bilingual churches? Like you have a lot of Latino kids at your school. What are you seeing in the families and the other kids?
Yeah. First, what I would like to say is that ICE is not new. I think with this, maybe the current administration, a lot of people are hearing about ICE. The immigrant community has been hearing about ICE. We call it in Spanish, La Migra, from the beginning.
What does that translate to?
La Migra is immigration.
Oh, okay.
La Migra is this is the immigration police. Okay. So for example, I'll give you this for context. like the joke is like if you are in a movie theater and you want everybody to run, you say fire, fire. Well, our joke is like if you're somewhere, you just joke and say La Migra, and that's when everybody starts running. Since we're little, that's the joke. We say La Migra because, so we're used to this. I think what happens now is that because of I would say the current administration and the news, everybody's talking about it. It's right there in the news, it's in social media, but this is not a new thing for us. So, so we're used to this. I don't know, Stephanie, if you want to add this.
No, I agree. I think, and before that, I will also say this is our experience, right? We can't speak for every person who, serves or ministers to the immigration community or immigrants. But I will say that growing up, we have had several, like I can remember watching the news or hearing the adults talk about it, and, La Migra or ICE was in Madison, and so what does that do? And I think the quick availability of information on social media has put people more on edge than it ever has before. And it's much more present in, in family conversations than it ever has before. But yeah, I would agree. This isn't a new thing. It's not a new experience. It's just much more present. I would say in every generation, it's not just the adults talking about it anymore. We have children who are expressing their concerns, again, because information is so readily available to them. So,
and I would like to add to that so the fear is not new. Yes, there is a fear, and we can talk more about it, but for the past 50, there's always been a fear, that someone can get deported. So this is not a new thing. I've known people for 20, 30 years who haven't been able to get a license, and I know that they get fearful if they're going to drive. They maybe don't drive on the bed line. If you're in Madison, that's like our main highway here. They go through the small roads. Everybody knows, if you're going to be driving with a license, make sure you follow the speed limit. Everything has to be perfect. Why? Because there's always the fear that something can happen. This has been happening for decades, and also the idea, for example, sometimes if it's a snowstorm, maybe a lot of people don't drive around, not because they're afraid of the snow, is because chances of getting in a car accident are higher, and we're not going to risk it. So that has been there for a long time. But also, as we have this conversation, I would like to add to the context that Lighthouse Church, in some of our experiences, are with people of faith in the Latino community. So as you're going to hear a lot of what we're going to say, well, I don't know what Stephanie's going to say, but it's people that are saying God is in control. Yes, we are in this situation, we're in this predicament. We know that how we came to this country. Maybe it's not right or whatever it is, but we are here, but we are going to trust God. It's very different from a lot of the Latino community that are not people of faith. Right. So you'll see that.
Yeah. And there is a divide. Level of there is that, I would say two things. One, something that is new, I think because of current administration and just sometimes it's even misinformation, but information nonetheless, is just this. I think people who have been in good standing, they have their residency or maybe they're in a process of asylum. What is new is the people wondering if that's going to remain, if, I know of people who do have, the residency, but they're not really wanting to travel outside the United States, because they're not really sure whether or not there's going to be an issue coming back in. So I would say that is new. And the other thing I was going to say too, as far as the, what Pastor Marcio was saying about the community that we work with, I think that's probably one of the biggest reasons I'm excited to be here is to be able to voice that, because even though there is that fear, there's an innate resiliency within the Latino community as a whole, but it's even, upped in the sense that people who have faith in the Lord to provide, to be there. Almost every Sunday, someone's coming up during altar call or after the message to say something happening with their appointment or some sort of shift with immigration. And it's always and sometimes they're in tears, they're afraid, but then it's always but pastora or but pastor, we know that God is in control. They just need that reminder in that moment, so that's kind of how it is right now.
Yeah. Okay. Can I ask one more question about like the situation before we move more into that? Is one of the things that people are hearing is there's more people who are actually here legally or have legal status that are getting caught up in the ICE stuff right now. Abby has a friend who knew people, a person in Minneapolis who like was here legally and then got caught up by ICE, two different people. And then one eventually got released back to their family. And then one got sent back to their country of origin, even though they were here legally and had papers for it. Are you hearing more of that kind of stuff, or are people more afraid of that sort of thing?
You want to
Go ahead.
Oh, I would say, I mean, I personally haven't dealt with that. I know that that's information that, that people have shared that has happened, which the one, I guess my personal connection to that, I'll just, my father is in that situation where he's got everything he needs, right? But he's kind of like, I don't know if I want to go anywhere. And we're thinking about vacationing or even traveling outside of the United States. So the reality, I guess, for a lot of people is when I don't know the context to some of these, things that are happening. But what gets out there is even if you have all you need, you're still not safe, right? Yeah. And so I think that's part of like why this conversation is helpful, because then what can we say to people who maybe, they've gone through that, the reality of that and had the injustice of that, but then, there are other people who haven't experienced that, and so I think that's why conversations like this are important. So personally, I haven't heard, I know that they're, what other people have heard is what I've heard. Right. But personally, I know that affects people.
Yeah, I think one of the things I say sometimes is if you have enough cases in anything, you're going to get a few bad ones.
Of course.
The problem is like sometimes then, like you want to minimize that. You can never get to zero.
Yeah.
But there's a big difference between having as few of those cases as possible and like sort of wantonly increasing them through some kind of disregard. And I think the accusations in the press have been like, there's a growth of predictable increases of bad cases. And I think people are afraid of that too.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think in my situation, for example, and I work with a lot of the Latino community. My world is, I would say, 90% the Latino community. I know people all over the United States, pastors that are in Hispanic churches. I personally do not know, that is verified, of one case that someone with documentation has been caught or been deported. I don't know of anyone. So I'm not saying that it's not happening, but I don't personally know anyone. But in the same situation like with Stephanie's father, my father has been a resident. He has a green card, which, by the way, now they're pink. But he does have a green card, and he has had a green card for over a decade. He's never wanted to become a U.S. citizen. Right now, he's becoming a citizen because he says, I might not let back in. So he went for it just because people are saying, hey, you might want to come. Every winter he goes back to Honduras, and he has never had an issue. But now his concern is, what about if the current administration will let me in? So he's applying for citizenship, which never was the case before. No. But in this regard, with people who are documented, or maybe they're here with a legal status, what I see is very different, is that I would say maybe even before COVID, if you were undocumented, there was just no way to be able to fix papers. Sometimes not even through marriage. So you were just undocumented, and that was your story. With a lot of people immigrating, especially, and I'm talking mostly Latin America, but from Venezuela and Nicaragua, and this has been a major exodus from those countries, we see them a lot. Yeah. A lot of them, they are able, because of refugee status or the situation with those countries who are socialist, they get a permit to be in this country. So actually what is different right now is that before, 10 years ago, if we had undocumented people in Lighthouse, no one had a license. Right now, half of them somehow, I would say, do have a license, do have a permit because they can stay here. What is happening now is that they get papers for about 18 months. So you're here documented in a sense of like, while you wait for your interview, it can be 2 years, 2 years and 2.5 years. During that time, you can get a license, you can work, you can do everything. When you go to the interview, that's when they can say, sorry, you have to go back to your country, or there's nothing that you can do. So what happens, sometimes it's not that they're here legally and they get sent back, is that that period expired, and now this is when they said, you have to go back.
or I've heard too of like you have 18 months and then that expires before the interview happens because it can take like
Yes.
2 and 2.5 years. So then they're trying to do everything the right way, but then there's this huge gap of time
Yes.
in between where that's not extended, but the interview's scheduled but hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
That causes some gray areas. Those stories were not mine that you mentioned.
No, I said a friend of somebody I thought you knew.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, not Abby's.
Yeah. Oh, one of my friends. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, you can always talk about that a little bit more. But so you're Christians before you're pastors, right? So as Christians and Americans, Latinos, like we call this being intersectional now. Like you have multiple things. How do you think this through? Like, how do you sort this out? Or do you just go like, look, God's in control. I'm not in charge of this stuff. And the things I'm not in control of, I don't worry about. I help. Like, how do you do it?
I mean, you have to recognize that there is an issue. So Stephanie and myself, we have gone with many church members to interviews in Chicago, in Milwaukee. I'm trying to figure out if tomorrow I can help someone to go because there is a fear. And in the news, you hear a lot, some people are getting detained. In the interview, they say, no, you don't get to stay here. And that day they detain you and they leave. So there is a fear. So it's almost like if your interview is this week, for a year and a half, you're fine. You're not even thinking about it. But now the interview is this week. Mm-hmm. So now they're trying to figure out, and we advise them, maybe give me an ATM to your bank account in case I need to release those funds. Mm-hmm. Find someone can be a guardian of your children in case you get detained. Mm-hmm. Instead of the government, taking your kids. I can help if I'm your guardian. And we go with them because they can't even sleep. They're wondering what is going to happen tomorrow because you've been here for 2-3 years and they're thinking, is tomorrow, are we going to be split? We're going to go back to a country that we don't even know because it's not like you go back to your own country.
You left isn't the Venezuela you're going back to.
And it's not like you're going back to Venezuela because if you're here for asylum or refugee status, you're saying Venezuela is too dangerous for me. So when you have to go back to another country. And they send you back. So there is the fear of this separation and uncertainty. Some of them bought houses, they have a job. So we go with them. In my case, I don't know with Stephanie, all the interviews have been there's no issue. I mean, everything is very polite. Everything is good. I will say it was almost like, what a waste because I spent, 4 hours in Milwaukee, in Chicago for absolutely nothing. But what I do is I go there, we're praying in the car, everything is going to be in control, everything is going to be good. And then afterwards, it's like, nothing happened. But that happens a lot. So every time, as Stephanie said, when we have an altar call or after the service, we say, if you need prayer, come and talk to the pastors. There's always someone that says, I have an interview this week and we need to pray about it.
Yeah, so as Christians, and this is one of those things where, at Lighthouse, and I might cry, but so these are family. This is people that they become, these are people that you see every Sunday, right? Mm-hmm. And so they, they'll come up and they'll say, we've had this happen several times where their appointment wasn't till 2027, 2029. And then they get this letter and sometimes they even bring the letter or a picture of the letter. And they ask us, am I reading this right? Do I have to go? And then a few, at the beginning of the month, I walked into one of our buildings and just to do something else, and there was one of our employees, and she's crying, and I'm like, what's going on? And she was freaking out because that had happened. She thought she had this much time and she didn't. The appointment was coming up, and it was in those moments it's like immediate, like, can I hug you? Like, let's just take deep breaths, and let's just what can we do now? And then because people start thinking about what he just said, my house, my kids, where am I gonna, because they're thinking I have to prepare for the worst, right? And so standing there with them and to be able to say, yeah, this sucks is important. I think that's an important part of empathizing with people and being there and supporting them, and yeah, this is a scary thing. We cannot, as Christians, deny that this is a scary thing, and we cannot deny that, yeah, the possibility of you being deported is real. So in that moment with this particular person, it's like I have to think very carefully of my words because, yeah, it could happen, right? It could, but let's trust God. So we do have to bring it back to, okay. And then immediately I was like, okay, we just did 2 other visits, and those turned out great. And immediately she's like, you did? And she's, okay, yeah, like maybe that's going to happen to me, you know? And it's like, yes. I'm like, you know what? I can't guarantee, but I know that, you know, Pastor Marcio went with some people. I just went with someone and everything went well. So let's just believe that everything's going to be okay, you know? And then, you know, we start asking questions because it's kind of like you go into this autopilot, right? I'm looking at Pastor Marcio, like, this is kind of, you start asking those questions, you know, like, are you, you know, what about the ATM? What about the house? You know, and then just to get people to, like, sometimes having information feels safe, you know, and the lack of information obviously brings fear. And so, long answer to say the first part is being able to say, yeah, this is scary. And it's okay to say that as a Christian. It's okay to say, I wish this wasn't happening to you. And it does not negate that God is faithful and true. But yeah, the reality is sometimes you could lose everything you've been working for. Right. And the next part of that, but we don't, I don't know. We're passionate about this.
So the reason I had you here is for you to be as passionate and to give your hot takes if you believe in them. Because part of the issue is some people in my church won't hear it any other way, or they won't hear from somebody they trust. There's a lot of people right now that, like, I joke about the news right now, that if I read something in the news, what I've been told is something I could look into if I wanted to, as opposed to getting information.
Sure.
Right? Oh, this allegedly happened. If I wanted to go find out for myself if this happened somehow, I could look into it. As opposed to saying, like, oh, somebody I trust is telling me something that I think is accurate. I think one of the nice things about having you guys here is other brothers and sisters in the body of Christ who have on the ground knowledge of what's happening, can tell them things that they might be able to just trust. All right. Or give an opinion that is learned from practice with people. Right. So even if you have views on immigration and immigration law and how people, like, you can share those here. Yeah. And some of our listeners might not agree. Some of them might find it incredibly refreshing. Yeah. But that's one of the things I try to say is this is the body of Christ. Like, we have different views on things and you got to hear everybody's view. So if you guys have views on even immigration and law, and even if this, it's fair game. Yeah. As long as you're trying for it to be informed by your Christian faith first. Yeah.
You know, something that I would like to say is, and I know we hear this also in the news, but the vast majority, I mean, I don't have an exact percentage, but I will say 99% of the people that are here are wonderful, amazing, good people. You know, there's bad people. Yes, there is bad people. There's some people that I'm like, you know, these people should go out. They're giving us a bad name, and you know, I'll tell you where they are going. You know, but it happens in every culture. You know, we have bad people. We're humans, but the majority of people are very, very good people. You know, the members of my church. These are people that we love. These are people that you know, we're spending time with. But these fears also, you know, I mean, these are real fears. You know, if we have children here, we know what it. Imagine if you get separated. Imagine if something were to happen. And as a consequence, as a stress, if we're pastors, we know that when people are stressed because of an interview, there's anger. You know, fear sometimes manifests in anger. So there might be more issues in their marriages. You know, sometimes there's the situation with employment. So now you have an interview. Maybe you lost your employment because of some situation. So now you're dealing with this fear of, like, are we going to get separated? We can't pay the bills. And you know what you're doing? You're screaming, you're yelling, your kids are getting the brunt of it, so we feel it at school. So these are a lot of issues that we have to deal with, not because these are bad people. They're just in the middle of a very difficult situation. But these are good people that we have to talk to. And just like if someone came to you, Nick, for example, and say, hey, I'm thinking of starting a business. What do you think? As a pastor, you try to give them good counsel. So a lot of the people come to us. For example, I'll give you a couple examples. One was, there was a family that says, hey, we just want to go back to Mexico. Because my fear is, what if we get separated from our children? This was a single mom with 2 young children. And she says, you know, instead of getting separated and immigration, you know, arresting us or whatever, and my kids going to one side and the adults going to another side, I'd rather just go back to Mexico. So we actually raise funds and we help this family go back. But we also need to talk to them and say, is this a wise decision? You know, how are you going to get back to Mexico? Do you have the finances to go back to Mexico? What's going to happen when you get to the border? You know, so we advise them with that. We have another family. They volunteer at the church. They're like an amazing family, and they have young children. And if you have teenagers, you know, it's a lot more difficult to move teenagers than little kids. Right now, they can just say, the kids are smaller. They can just say, we're going back to Ecuador or Venezuela, whatever it is, and the kids are just going to follow along. When you're trying to move a 16-year-old that is here in a soccer team, probably is even dating someone, it's a lot more difficult to move teenagers. So this family, their immigration appointment is not until like 2029. And they're saying, they're trying to make a decision. They met with us, they're talking to us. Should we just leave instead of waiting? Because what about if in 2029, they say no to us, we have to go back, and now our kid is a junior in high school, and he doesn't want to go back versus right now being younger. So we're talking to them, and we're saying, where are you going to go? What about your finances? What about your house? What decision are you going to make about this? Are we going to trust God? Are we making decisions out of fear, or because this is what God is telling us to do? So we need to advise them in making the right decisions as well.
Yeah. Okay.
And there's so many factors that play into that. I love how you mentioned all of those things, because I think it's easy for people who aren't close to it to oversimplify it and say, like, just go back to where you came from. And it's never that simple, and it's so much more complicated than that. And you can make a wise, godly decision. You have to take all of that into account to do so. So that's a great perspective.
Yeah, at least the people at Lighthouse, you know, it's not a decision that people take lightly. So they do come for counsel. You know, but I was thinking about what you were saying, Nick, as far as like, you know, sharing our views or stuff like that. And yeah, and we're definitely, you know, open to doing that. But I think right now, I think what has felt, and I've talked to Marcio about this, like what has felt, especially as leaders in the community, sometimes it feels like we have to take a stance before like doing the work. And sometimes, I mean, I've told them we don't have time to take a stance because especially when after Minneapolis, I felt like there was some sort of like push to like, well, what do you guys think? You know, and why haven't you posted any? It was almost like, why isn't there a public stance on what you think? You know, and it was like, well, we just took like 3 families to Milwaukee this week. Like we just, you know, we're praying with these people. We just met with this family. Like they're making a major life decision. And part of me gets frustrated with that, I'll be honest, because it's like, while people, yes, it's important to use your voice and use your platforms, but that's really good. But also like, people who are asking us, how can we pray? Or like, what can we do? I've actually said to people, are you available to give a ride to Milwaukee? Because like, that's what we need, you know? And it's like, and that's where I think we can be better at, you know, I think beyond taking a stance and saying, you know, I agree with that or I disagree with that. I think as the body of Christ, the call is, you know, to like lend a hand, to be there. And even if some people just say, well, we're praying, like those prayers are very significant. Like when you're praying specifically for a family to like, you know, be at peace at their appointment, the prayers are effective, you know, and to be able to tell a family, hey, these people at this church are praying for you. They light up. They're like, thank you so much. Like, thank you for praying for us. Thank you for caring about this, you know? So I think I just wanted to say that piece as well. Like more than, you know, agreeing or disagreeing, it's like, how can we be Jesus to these people? And then, yeah, so there's that.
Yeah, and I think some of those practical things are specifically like what I am interested in, like being able to help in like a practical way. Like if there's rides that are needed, like specifically like how to pray or who to pray for, are like great options. Because like you were saying, like when there is fear, like having practical steps you can take, what to do next, like what's the next best thing, the next best good thing is something we say a lot at High Point. Like you don't have to figure it all out, but what's the next best good thing for you to do? And that is really helpful. So those perspectives, and maybe there's more of those things that we can talk about how we can help and assist, and like where we can step in to help you guys with some of those things.
Yeah, if you have ideas for us concretely, we'd love to hear them. Yeah. When you said that, I was like, would it be good if somebody drove someone to Milwaukee if they weren't bilingual? But if you guys do have things like that where people can help, I think that there's a population at our church that would really love to help.
Absolutely.
in ways they can.
Yeah, for example, right now we're dealing with something where like tomorrow someone is going, I have all these meetings, Stephanie has all these meetings, and they need a translator. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, who can we send that can translate to them? And again, we're not attorneys. So it's not like we go there and we know what to say and like, oh, this is Pastor Marcio, so here's your permit. We don't even know what's going to happen. So really what it is to be in the car just to encourage them, to be there for them. I'm here for you. And that's what we're doing, you know? So we don't have any extra information. We're just being present and letting them know I'm here for you if you need me.
Sometimes I think even in an appointment like that, the person whose appointment it is, just being nervous, sometimes you don't hear what's being said, even if you are competent in the language.
Yes.
Right.
Because you're just locked up, you know?
Exactly.
Yes.
And to have another person say, okay, this is what they just said.
Yep.
It sometimes can be really helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Hey, so if you're listening to this and you have bilingual friends at High Point that may not hear this episode, share it with them because they might hear this and go, oh, I would love to do that.
Yeah.
And there are some situations where the financial help is needed.
Yeah.
So for example, and we get emails like this all the time from church members, but also in the community that know that Lighthouse is helping. So there's this person, for example, got detained. He's the one that had a good job making, you know, a lot of money, and the wife didn't work. So now this person is detained. Sometimes it can be 3 months that you're detained. So now this lady doesn't have how to pay rent. So sometimes we do, things like that. In another situation, maybe, yes, they have to go to an immigration appointment. They don't have an attorney. They need an attorney. But sometimes these are $6,000, $10,000, even more. I mean, it can be $5,000 per person. And you're a family of 5. So sometimes you need a lot of money, and we're trying to help these families because they're trying to pay rent. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to, do their expenses. They don't have insurance, so they're paying a debt at the hospital. And on top of that, they had to pay for an attorney. So sometimes we try to see how we can help a lot of these families.
And I want to reiterate that, like, to anyone listening, that these are people who want to do things well.
Yes.
Like, I think there is sometimes a misconception. I was talking to someone not so long ago about some people feeling like they want to help those who are doing things right, And what I explained her, I asked her to explain like what that meant or what she thought that meant. And yeah, I think it comes down to whether someone is actually actively trying to, secure legal status in the country versus someone who's not. But I do want to say there's so many factors that go into making a decision like that. And one of the biggest ones is money. Like it's really costly to pursue the right legal counsel. And I will also say that there is legal counsel out there who do take advantage of people. And that's something that we do warn people at Lighthouse about. Like, when they promise you something that sounds too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So please, and we say, come to us and ask, because we have had unfortunate cases where people invest thousands of dollars and with, empty promises. It's really not a case that can be solved as quickly as they were promised, right? But all of that to say, like, the majority, like Pastor Marcio said, he doesn't have a percentage. He said 99%. I would agree with that. The majority of people that are here are wanting to secure. Who doesn't want to feel safe in their own home? Like, who doesn't want to be, walk around in the community feeling like no one's, watching them, or they could just get picked up and nobody. Like, everyone wants that sense of security. And so this is also the immigrant community, like they want to do things right, but it is a costly affair. It is. And when you don't have, people who can watch your kids so that you can get an extra job, there's all these decisions that go into place. So I do want to just put that out there, that whenever you do hear, it might be Lighthouse that you hear asking for help and money, it is for people that are trying to do things right.
Yeah. Okay. Let me say something really quick. And then I want to ask a couple impertinent questions that may sound ignorant or mean, just so that you guys can answer them in this context. Okay. So the first thing I want to say is, if you're listening from High Point, after people who are part of High Point who need benevolence help, help, the next thing we do with benevolence money we give it to other churches, like Lighthouse, in situations like this. So we might not do like lawyer fees. That would be a decision our benevolence people would make. But like rent is something we would do. So like if Marcio or Stephanie came to us, if we could take care of our people here, which we always can, there's another amount of money. We used to just give it away to like shelters and stuff like that. But we've been trying to disperse it to churches, and mostly immigrant churches in Madison, because a lot of the Caucasian churches are funded fine. So you guys, if you don't know, I want you to know that's available. But like that's what we do, and I want our members to know that's what we do with the money. We use it in our church, and then we give it to other churches to give to people that they vet, because we know these are people you vetted. You know them. They aren't just people that you just throw money at. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, a couple of pertinent questions. One, when you guys say 99%, do you think that covers like 99% of the Latino immigrants at Lighthouse? Or would you apply that to like Latino immigrants kind of like across the board? Or would you apply it to immigrants across the board?
That's a great question. You want to go or you want me to go?
I will say something. I'm not very familiar with immigrant communities. I work with our immigrant communities, but I am not part of their life. That's not part of my life. But I will say Latinos across the board. I know a lot of people, and I work with a lot of people. I'm also part of the board of the Latino Chamber of Commerce, so I interact with a lot of Latinos in Wisconsin and other places that are not part of a church. They're not even believers, and they're wonderful people. It's in general, a lot of the people are good. They have issues, but they are good people. Where yes, morally we're all people that are falling in sin. But what I want to say, these are not people that are trying to sell drugs to you, or criminals that are trying to rape people, or doing like the majority are just human beings who try to do their best, but because of sin, we're immoral. That's what it is. So yes, are they lying? Yes. They have an affair maybe? Yes. Are they having issues with their children, relational issues? Yes. But these are good people that just have sin in their lives.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think, again, my context is the Latino immigrant community. And I spoke about that before, like the innate resiliency and that I see just culturally. This is something that is there. I would say it's the same with this. Like, I would say the majority of people across the board that come to this country come because they want to better themselves. They want to better their lives. They see opportunity here. And so it's hard to think, and I understand why some think that, but just to think about wanting to leave your home, what you know, where you grew up, your family, and you're thinking, I'm going to go start over in a new place where I don't speak the language. I might get in trouble. I might get arrested. I might not have, I'll be separated from my kids. I feel like the reason why people come here is to be better, because they're already great. They already have this innate desire to provide, to give their kids the best, to leave something behind for their families and their home countries, So, so yes, I agree with what you're saying.
And I wouldn't even just say that we're just good people. We're actually a blessing to this nation, in the sense that, the values that we bring, it's, if you go to the Latino culture, not only at church, but in general, it's family values are very strong. Honoring your parents. They're always together. They're eating together. I don't know if this still happens where like everybody eats in front of their TVs all over. Latinos are still eating together, and that's very important, and taking care of the elderly. And just to add more controversy to this podcast, but like, for example, the whole Super Bowl thing with Bad Bunny, and I'm not supporting Bad Bunny or not. That music, if my children put that type of music, I'll be like, oh, because it's very vulgar. But if you saw what happened at the Bad Bunny, Super Bowl event, it was just show of community. There was a wedding. There was even a kid sleeping, in the wedding, because they're all together. It was a beautiful community. It was showing the community that is the Latino community. And I think that was a beautiful thing. During COVID, 2020, I think a lot of people were talking about, we were so locked in our houses that everybody put their phones away and you were talking to your neighbors and you actually saw kids playing outside. That happened in 2020. We were not seeing that in the United States. Well, that is the community.
That's how
That's the Latino community.
Yeah.
We're talking to our neighbors. We're outside. We're having cookouts. And, if I have a cookout, the neighbor is coming to the cookout. And we have a saying, we just add more water to the soup, and that's a beautiful thing. And actually, we bring something beautiful to this community that I think is lacking in this community.
Yeah, character flaws are inevitable. I mean, that's just human, right?
Yeah, you can't. You're not supposed to hold people to a higher standard than you hold yourself.
Yeah.
And I mean, American citizens are not exactly the exemplars of all moral values at this point in history, right? Like,
yeah. So I would say, separated from that, it's like when I right now, as I was listening to Marcio, I was thinking, what would it sound like, to hear these two Latinos talking about how great Latinos are on this podcast. But in reality, as I think about it, we, like, God made us all, we have this value because of our Creator, right? And so if I can just, for a moment, think about my neighbor as valuable simply because God created him or her, and then be like the what is it? El punto de partida. What is Pastor Marcio?
The starting point.
Yeah, the starting point. To where it's like how I interact with people. And that might make a difference.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. I want to say more on that. I want to ask a couple more increasingly impertinent questions. Okay. So some people who maybe listen to more press that's on the right, like more Republican press, sometimes we'll get the impression that what people are fleeing from is really not that bad. They just really want to come to America because America is wealthy, right? And so what they're fleeing is like poverty. It's not like death. Like, what are your experience? Obviously this isn't a perfect sample, but what are your experiences of people who are coming on asylum? Is that like just a way to get in the country legally, or are they like, for God's sake, coming from like very acute political or religious danger?
That's good. You want to go? I can do it too.
Yes. I want to start by saying we love our countries. And if we could, we wouldn't be in the United States. Okay. I mean, that is the truth. We love our countries. That's why when we come here, we have our flags. We're trying to go and eat our food. Many people can wait to go and visit their countries. And yes, some people are coming simply because of poverty, but we need to understand that poverty in many of the countries that we're talking about is not like the poverty here. I have some people, for example, from the United States who are homeless right now. Well, this person is homeless, and we think of poverty, but they're renting a car every day, and they're sleeping in their car, and they have their cell phones. To us, like, how is this poverty? But they're homeless. So what happens over there is such a poverty that the only way that the children can get ahead is they join a gang. They sell drugs, or women go into prostitution. There's no way of feeding your children. So it's a situation where they have not eaten in weeks. They're on the streets. And also because of the poverty in many of these countries, the neighborhoods get taken over by gang crimes, drug lords, and things like that. So when your children become 12, 13, you have no say in what your children are going to do. So either you take them out of these neighborhoods before your children get taken over by gang members because you have no choice, and your daughters go into prostitution, or you stay there and that's what you face. So in a lot of the situations, yes, it's not like a gang is trying to kill you. It's not that a government is going to persecute you because of certain things, but it's such a dire situation that that's what they have to do this. I mean, we have families where one of the spouses has to leave family alone so that they can work and send son money to try to pay, for something. Children are growing up with parents. Parents are dying. Grandparents are dying because of sicknesses. So parents have to come here. Children have to come here to be able to send money for medication. So no one is coming here just because, I got bored of this country. There's more opportunity. I can buy a house over there. They're just trying to provide for their families.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't doubt that there are people who use, kind of like the current political climate or whatever has happened in their neighborhood to benefit, their case here in the U.S. I don't doubt that happens. But again, I go back to, and he said it, loving our country. It's thinking about moving from what I know, from what is comfortable, from what is generally safe, so to speak, to like something that I don't know. Why would people do that if not to then pursue something that they either see as better or have heard about better? I mean, I remember we did a couple years. We do this mission trip in Mexico, and the first time we ever went, we have done Bible camps with kids, and there was this young man who was asking us about the U.S. because people hear about the U.S., the land of, the dreams, and your dreams will come true. And he was asking us all these questions. Is it true that you can get, McDonald's anytime you want? Is it true that you can? So sometimes it is that. It's growing up in Mexico, in Honduras, in Venezuela, hearing about just the availability of things that make life better. So sometimes there is that, there is this desire to like travel and know, but ultimately, it's when people leave what they know to find security and safety. It's never because it's never one of those things where I'm bored, I just want to leave. No, it's out of need. It's out of desire to do better, to leave something behind for kids, like I've said before. So,
and just the courage that would take to have such an impossible decision with your children being almost teenagers and having to make those choices. And the courage that it would take to leave all of that behind, I think, gets lost in translation a lot in these discussions. Yeah. And I think just going back to the sense of community in the Latino populations is just something that is very present, like in my side of the Puerto Rican family, that I love so much. Like that sense of community is something that as Christians we're striving to emulate. And I think that's something that Latinos do so well. And so just wanted to go back to your point on that is something that I see as very unique and very important, and can translate so well throughout like faith and culture. And like you're saying, that's so valuable. Yeah.
But one of the situations that almost every youth leader of Latino churches or Latino communities deals with is teenagers are actually going to a depression because of coming to this country. Because, I want to go. Oftentimes, children do not know what the parents know. So the parents know that we don't know how to pay the rent. Someone is threatening us. There was a kidnap, half the block away from our house, and parents are trying to do the right thing. Children, they're just having fun. They're playing, they're doing whatever. So a lot of what we deal with, and I remember when I was leading the youth group and a lot of the kids at that time, Stephanie's, many of them were teenagers and they don't even understand why they came to this country. And they're saying, my dad was an accountant over there in Colombia. And right now, he's cleaning a toilet, in the hospital. And there's nothing wrong with cleaning a toilet, but they're like, why? We used to have a house, with 4 bedrooms over there. And right now, the 6 of us are in a 2-bedroom apartment. And teenagers are upset. And I was in this soccer team. Now I can't even play soccer, and I don't understand the language. And it's this situation where, and we do a lot of counseling with that, where we have to work with families because we have these teenagers going through a very difficult age, upset at their parents because why do you bring me to this nation? So that happens a lot.
And they don't know, like I said, and the other part, there are people who are fleeing really scary things. We know stories of people who have witnessed murders, who have witnessed, very strong, violent situations, scary situations, car bombings. And it's not necessarily tied directly to them, but it's happening daily, weekly in their neighborhood, and where their kids, they can't go out and play anymore, and so that's also a reality for a majority of the people, at least the people that we know.
We have all those stories. What you see in the movies that you think there's no real. We're dealing with a person at our church who she was kidnapped for 6 months and raped, and all of this was happening in the country, and we're dealing with this now. Because of what was happening in their country.
Correct.
Yeah, I think that when people in America, some people, particularly on the right side of the aisle politically, think in terms of like, okay, what asylum is for is religious persecution, direct ideological persecution, or like government dictatorships, right? And I think a lot of Americans don't have the experience of the political totalitarianism of just local crime. Just that there's a spiral that, and they're like, well, why don't these people build up their economies? And it's like, because there's too many leeches and not enough fish. Like it's like there's this constant parasitic predation on what people are trying to do positively, and you just can't get above it, and it is a kind of quasi-governmental totalitarianism, just through organized crime. And I think people struggle with, because the Latino person is like, well, I came for a better life, and you're like, well, what does that mean? But when you're in a place where the organized crime or the totalitarianism is just kind of, it's localized, it's ingrained, it's like, sometimes people in America, like, we just don't experience that very much. We think if we go for an interview, we're going to get a fair shot at the job. We think and if you haven't lived in India, if you haven't lived in Venezuela, or like, you don't understand what that's like.
Yeah, or just calling the police. I mean, I remember growing up, so we had this young man was being like beaten, in the street, and I was probably like maybe 6, but he was getting, jumped by people. He was, and they ended up right in front of our house, and he was getting hurt badly, and everyone's out of their home screaming, but no one's calling the police. And I remember I said to my mom, like, Mom, let's call the police. She's like, La policía no va a llegar. The police isn't going to come, so we might, like, let's figure out how to help the guy. So just that part, being able to call 911 and having the assurance that they might not come when you want, but they're going to come. We don't have that. There isn't that. You can call, but who knows if they'll make it? Who knows if they have and then maybe they want to, but they don't have the resources to make it to your house up in the mountain somewhere.
Right.
It's a systemic issue.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to understand in many of these countries. So what it is if you start a store, let's say you want to get ahead and you start a store. Over there they call it, I don't know if it translates literally, but the war tax. All that means is almost like a mafia where, you need to give a percentage of your business to this person. And if you don't, then they're like, oh, we know your children, or we know this, or I threaten the other people. Nick is cutting trees. That's his business. Nick doesn't want to give me money. So I'm telling everybody, if you go with Nick, there's going to be trouble. Or someone in the neighborhood who is involved with crime, their child, out of the sudden, started a tree cutting business. But now the whole neighborhood knows no one can hire anybody other than this person. So they are not directly being affected, but it's just a very bad way of living.
Oppressive.
Yeah.
It's very oppressive because there's nothing you can do. In this mission trip that we did, and we did it in combination with another church, Christchurch, Madison, we went together. We went to this town, and we knew that the drug cartel had a say in the town. We knew who they were. Everybody knows who they are.
Yeah.
They just don't mess with you if you don't mess with them. But they knew who we were.
Yeah.
And I remember this one time, I broke my leg, so I stayed there, and the whole group went to visit another town. And they came to me, and they say, where's the rest of the group? They knew who we were.
Yeah.
They knew who we were working with. They're just kind of like, they're informed. And I said, I broke my leg, and they went here, and they're just kind of checking, like, because they want to know what everything's happened. I talked to them. I even shared the gospel with them, and I pray with one of them, and I know who they are. Everybody knows who they are. You just don't mess with them, but you're living in that environment. And this is actually the one thing that I even talked to Stephanie. What's unfortunate about this is your children are 12 and 13. They're getting older. One of them is very pretty. They're both very pretty, but like, imagine one of them and one of these drug lords just decides, I like this girl. How do you say no to this person? I like your daughter. And what do? You have to run away.
Yeah. Okay, I would love to dig into this more, but I also want to kind of promote your ministry some too. So, because I have like 9 more questions I would like to ask. But I want people to hear about Lighthouse. I also want you to be able to say, so Lighthouse, I read the report cards for the schools. Report card was great this last year. Can you tell people a little bit about like how the school and the church is ministering in our community?
Yes, one thing as I share about that, I want to also say that Lighthouse is very diverse. So there's a lot of people who are very conservative, who are big Trump supporters. There's some people that could care less either way, and there's some people that are completely against Trump. We have it all within the church. I remember when...
We have that high point.
Yeah, but it happens everywhere. So I remember when the elections happened, in November, and President Trump, was elected, I had to come back and I had to preach a message. And my message was, okay, you guys, let's love everybody. You know, if you're a big Trump supporter, because we have people celebrating, and Pastor Marcio, let's just have a worship night because praise God, and God has sent us a man who is going to do this. And there's another one's like, Pastor, let's have a prayer vigil because, you know, we have the devil now in control, you know, and we have them all. And there's others that like, oh, you know, we don't care. So I had to preach a message about honoring each other. Because one thing that we need to understand is that in the Latino community, there's a lot of conservative people. What the Bible says is very important. And people are concerned, and it's very important to them that, you know, in elections, for example, whatever they're saying is in line with what the Bible is saying. And sometimes, yes, even though they might not be here, you know, legally, they're thinking, do I put my situation or God first? And they're going to pick God, you know? So there's a lot of that in our school. You know, we have a school that there's a lot of kids who are very, you know, more liberal, but they love the fact that we have a school that is voucher, that is mostly supported by the Republicans. Sometimes I feel like saying, like, you know, well, the way your vote doesn't add with this, and it's very an interesting dynamics. So I wanted to make sure that people know that situation, because we have a little bit of everything.
Some people that listen to this don't know that if the Democratic Party in Wisconsin got its way, you would not exist.
We will not exist.
And the right for minority people to start their own school and to have vouchers for each kid and do it their way, particularly Christian.
And that's the reason. A lot of that, we have a lot of families. The reason why we have a waiting list is because for many Christian families, especially, sending their children to a Christian school is very important. It's not about status. Sometimes it's not even about a better education. Of course, that's part of it, but it's because we want our children to grow up with Christian values. And they see the issues that are happening in other schools. They don't like what they see.
And I will say, I mean, yes, Christian families, but we actually have had some families who say, we're not Christian, we don't go to church, but it's these values that we want. And we want this choice. We want this opportunity. So that's also there.
We've had a few Muslim and Hindu immigrant families put their kids in at High Point because they're like, will you teach our kids that stealing is wrong?
Yeah.
We're like, yeah.
Yes.
And so they're like, okay, great.
Yeah, exactly. People care about that. Absolutely.
So having said that, you know, we have the school. We started the school. Yes, we want children to have Christian values. But when we started the school, you know, in 2004, really, it was because some families from the church actually came to the senior pastor then, Stephen Schultz, I was the associate pastor, and saying, our children are not learning. We actually only have a 3rd grade education. We went to 6th grade education. We were very poor. Our schools were horrible. And now we're in the land that is flowing with milk and honey. Our children are in 6th grade, and they don't know how to read. Like, I was like, what is happening? You know, and because of the issues that were happening to the children, three families came to the pastor and said, I know that there's some families that are doing homeschool. You think they will homeschool our children? They couldn't homeschool themselves. They didn't know how to. They don't have the education. And when they said that, that's when we said, well, why don't we start a school to help a lot of these children? And then that's when we realized about the achievement gap.
Without the vouchers.
Without the vouchers.
Yeah, because they started without the voucher system.
From 2004 to 2013, it was without the vouchers. We had no finances. If you were getting rid of a chair, we will take it. Our classrooms had different desks, chairs.
Yeah, they were running on less than half of the tuition we were charging, and our tuition was substantially less than what a voucher would be.
Yes, and we gave discounts for families. We had 21 children when we started. It was 3 families. It was 3 families. So on average, kids were paying about $175. You know, and 20, that wouldn't even cover the salary for one teacher. And that's how we were doing it. But everybody wanted to come because of the values, because it was a better education. So we're doing the school that continues to grow. The church is growing, but also because the Latino community is growing. So we have gone to 2 services now on a Sunday. We probably have a little over 400 people that come on a Sunday because the Latino community is growing, but a lot of the Hispanic churches are growing. And this is one thing that I want to say, and the Latinos also see. 6, 7+ years ago, people will come and they will get a job today. And if you don't like it, by the afternoon, you could get in another job. What is happening now is, and we recognize it too, and Latinos will recognize it, there's so many immigrants coming that now 3, 4 months, even longer can go by and you cannot find a job. There is no housing. There are times that we have the money We have raised the money to pay housing for someone, but we cannot find a place for them to stay. So we see the issue also of now having to help, even though the church has grown, financially it hasn't grown much. Why? Because a lot of the people that are coming now don't have a lot of the finances to even support the church because they don't have jobs. So that is one of the issues that we see. The community is growing. There's less jobs. That causes a lot of issues. It brings about poverty. And it causes a lot of issues. The food pantry, for example, we had to have a food pantry. It was growing. We had lines of people. And yes, it's great. You know, a lot of people are coming to the food pantry. They know about the church now. They come to church. Oh, we have 2 services now. We're growing. But we also see the concern of how do we get these people jobs? How do we provide for these families? How do we help them with rent? And it's concerning.
Yeah. Most of the churches that a lot of people who listen to this go to, they don't think in terms of like the pastor has to do economic development so that people can live, and also so that people could even give to the church so that you could do the things churches do. Most people just think, yeah, well, people come, they have jobs, they just give. And you're like, well,
No,
It's not like
it's not
that.
like that. But what the beautiful thing that we see over and over again is once, we are able to secure housing, a car, a job, those same people will come back and volunteer at the pantry. Those same people will come back and give to the newest family who, is in need. Those same people will then, collect whatever clothing, whatever furniture, whatever. I mean, it happens so regularly, that once people, they're so grateful. They found community, they found family, and then they just give back. And that happens all the time.
Yes. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. One thing that I wanted to say also, because there's a lot of talk that people were so fearful that people are not going, to the church, they're staying in their houses. The Latino churches are actually growing.
Yeah.
More people are coming. And I remember that Sunday after the elections, even though the elections happened in November, it wasn't going to happen until January that you actually become a pastor. A lot of people were saying that people are going to be afraid. I think that was one of the more full services that we have had, because actually a lot of people said, we're going to not come against what's happening, but we're going to put this in God's hand. So a lot of people were coming to the church, but we do see an increase in the food pantry. And it does break my heart. Even though we have a food pantry, sometimes when the line is very big, it's not that I get excited. I'm like, oh, yes, this is working. No, to me, it's like, this is concerning because it's a huge line. There's a lot of people, and I'm not even thinking, evangelism, this is going to be great. It's actually concerning because of the big need that we see.
Yeah, the goal of every food pantry is to close.
To close. Yeah. That's what we want. Yes.
But you guys are one of the only food pantries that has bilingual service in the region, right?
Is bilingual. I don't know actually if other places have bilingual service, but we're one of the few that actually you can come from anywhere in the region to come. Some people you can only be in San Prairie if you're in that area. Yeah. So we don't really require ID. We do have bilingual people, and also the food that we get is catered towards the communities that we're serving.
Yeah.
So we do have that as well. But what has happened at Lighthouse, because we have the church, we have the school, we have the pantry, I'm involved in the community, a lot of people feel safe coming to Lighthouse. One of the things that happens with Lighthouse that it has become a hub. For example, where even in the border, if you're in the border and they know that you're going to Wisconsin, as people are talking, they know, if you get to Wisconsin or Madison, there's Father Marcio, they think I'm a father, Father Marcio that will help. Sometimes we get people that come and they're like, I heard about you guys and crossing the border and that you guys help. And sometimes we're like, what can we do? We've never heard of them. But people feel safe coming to Lighthouse.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, that's good. Are there other churches in the region that are doing well that people, because some people have heard of Lighthouse because you guys have done a lot to have relationships with lots of other kinds of churches. Can you out these churches? Maybe it's not positive, but how many other churches are you they have solid pastors, they've been here for a while, the church seems to be growing. Maybe you just tell me the number of church, but what are we talking about in terms of scale? When you say Latino churches are growing.
Yeah, there's a lot of churches that actually are doing very good, and they have a solid pastor, and they're growing. I would say the issue that they have, and they come to us for help, is because of maybe the connections that we have at Lighthouse, is that they don't fit in their buildings, or they're renting, and now the churches where they were renting, they said, you're bigger than us, you need to move out. So sometimes they will come to Lighthouse because they're like, Marcio, we need a bigger place. can you help, or can you provide the finances, or can you talk to another pastor where we can meet in their buildings, because they're growing too fast.
So they're meeting in like some of these smaller neighborhood churches as like a second congregation?
As a second congregation, or they're in a small storefront and they're renting a small place, but you can fit 50 people and now you're at 75 and they don't know what to do.
Okay.
So they're remodeling places. I know this church, great pastors, they have to remodel the building that they have. They got a bigger building, but they don't have the finances to do a lot of work that they're doing. And one of the unfortunate situations is that there's a good probably 16, 17 Latino churches in Madison that are growing. I think the only full-time pastors are both at Lighthouse Church. Everybody else is bivocational.
Yep.
So they're serving their people, they're working full-time, and most of them are not office jobs. They're hard work, where they're drywalling, they're doing construction, you're tired. They don't have time to connect. I have the blessing that I have time to connect. So sometimes they will connect to me to see if I can connect them to someone else.
Because they can't drive people to Milwaukee.
They can, and sometimes they can drive people to Milwaukee.
No, they can't. But I mean, this week I was actually just praying for these pastors, because I was reminded of just how these churches run, and they're operating and they're successful, and people are finding community, and people are being discipled with pastors who have a full-time job in addition to the full-time job of pastoring, and so it's an incredible ministry that you see. And like a lot of, I think most everyone that is like operating a Hispanic church. That's the story. That's how it goes. And people are still being taken care of, and those churches are still growing.
Yeah. And so you guys ended up buying the old university building. You've built onto it. You've bought stuff adjacent to it.
Yes.
Which has been great.
We can buy, we can build.
Because you can use a certain amount of voucher money on buildings, right? Which is great.
Yeah. So we did that, and it supports. So in our case, so for example, in my situation, I do a lot of work for the school. Part of my salary is actually paid. In a sense, I can say I'm bivocational, but the other part of my job is actually the school.
School, right?
Same with Stephanie. She works with a lot of the staff and even students in some areas. There are also church members, but part of her salary is also covered, by the school and different things like that. But yeah, we are growing. We bought a building. We're gonna expand the school. We did an expansion. And thanks to God, we were able to raise a lot of the funds. We did a food pantry. It was $800,000. We were able to raise the funds. So God has blessed us in that way. And that's why sometimes I feel that if it's not about me, God has put me in that place. And I see that I have almost like a responsibility to helping other pastors it's not that I'm better than them, it's that God has put me in this situation.
Right.
And I almost have an obligation of helping them.
Yeah. I would agree. I think I always, I'm hesitant, when people hear Lighthouse has all these buildings and all this, it's like, oh, this money is coming in and out, but there is all of it is for service, and the number of organizations that use our building over the weekend, throughout the week, up to upwards of 10 sometimes. Yeah,
and actually churches, it's about 6 different churches that are using our building. Sometimes I can't even use my building because there's groups there, and we don't charge a penny.
And it's all free. And it's all free. So this is really about, serving the community together, and, having the Lord grant wisdom to steward the resources, as best we can.
Yeah. I think there's people that go to High Point that are, but like we try to have this kind of like outward facing thing, and I've been really proud of what they've been able to do over the last 16 years here at High Point. But I want people to see that like there's other churches like Lighthouse that maybe even have less resources, but they're using their building like we're trying to use our building. They use any extra money they have, like we try, like that ethos that we're trying to build at High Point is not exclusive to us.
Right.
It is shared, and you guys are doing it with people that we might not naturally bump into, and it's making a difference. When you share that stuff, it is harder. It makes your ministry harder, but it allows other ministries to expand, and hopefully the church in the Madison area does better.
Yeah.
Yes, and we do it like that. So, for example, like if I know that a church is calling me and they said, Marcio, we're trying to build a classroom for the children because we don't have a place for the children to go there. I will call someone. For example, I can call High Point. And I know that I can say, High Point, we need $10,000 for this. I will let go of that. And I would say, will you be able to help this other church, knowing that maybe now I won't be able to get that money, but I feel like that's something that we have to do. And I do this all the time. All the Latino pastors, they know that there's several pastors that are, in our congregation. And if they need someone to cover their pulpit, there we are. We have told the community, because we have a building, if you need a building, talk to us. You can use it whenever. We don't have to run your show. Here's the keys. You can do it, on your own, whatever, that it is that you're doing. We have baptismal tanks. We're always telling people this is what we can do and how can we help you.
Yeah. And I want to say too, because you mentioned it earlier, but to all who are listening who have given, to High Point, and then High Point shares those funds, like it's a major blessing. And it's blessing is an understatement, just to know that we, like Pastor Marcio, can make a phone call like that to other partners, in the city who are willing to give and support people. It's a beautiful thing. And this isn't something that we're meant to be alone, that we're meant to do alone anyway. So we just want to say thank you to that.
Yeah. And I think Blackhawk has really been a church that's been like that too. It was City Church. Christ Church. Yeah. There's a number of churches in Madison right now, I think that are trying to do that, and I think we're seeing a result. I think the church is doing better, and a lot of churches are growing. And
absolutely,
my part of the hope here is that probably in the next 15 years we're going to see some of these churches. There will be churches in Madison that are going to close that have buildings, and the transition of those buildings closing to some of these congregations you're talking about being able to get those buildings is going to take some doing, and it's going to take some money.
Yes.
And so we've participated in helping 3 or 4 churches now get a building, afford to buy a building. And so I just want to prepare our listeners over the next 10 or 15 years as some of these churches age out and close, and some of these immigrant churches will be like, hey, we would love that building. That's where High Point hopefully will be able to help other churches to begin to build up, like you guys said, because it's taken a couple of decades for you guys to go through these transitions. And some of these other churches may end up with leaders that could do that if they could have one vocation, if they could spend the majority of their time on their church and the ministries that they're building and so on. Yeah. So, okay. All right. You guys have to go pretty soon. Yeah. So is there anything? Okay. I want to say one thing about Lighthouse. There's so much good about Lighthouse, but your sports teams have gotten so much better. When they first started, they were like, what's a basketball? And now it's like, Lighthouse is going to kick our butts. Your sports teams have just come so far.
Yay!
It is good, but one unfortunate thing, and I will say this because I don't mean this in a mean way, but sometimes you will see our teams and you will get intimidated. When you see the kids that are going to play against you, you're like, oh my goodness, we're going to get killed. And sometimes we get killed. Because this is what's unfortunate with a lot of the, and I will say minority community in general. Club sports are extremely expensive.
Yeah.
And many of the families that we serve, they cannot afford club sports. And unfortunately, we're at the time, when I was younger, you actually got good on the streets. Those who were in club sports were not the good teams. But now children are not on the streets learning soccer, basketball. They're at home on their screens. So what's unfortunate is that many of the children that we serve are competing with other kids who are in clubs. They're getting trained. And that is a big issue. So that's actually one of the things that we want to do is we want to build a big gym because we're starting to do future leagues. And what is future leagues? We get the first graders, second graders to start learning basketball and volleyball and all of these sports because we're already behind of a lot of the other kids.
It's very pronounced by the time you get to 7th and 8th grade.
It is. My daughter, for example, and we have more means than others, but a lot of the clubs, you pray on the weekends. And unfortunately, I had to say to my daughter, as a daughter of a pastor, you just can't do clubs. That's just, we can do it because we're very involved in the church. So she knew that all her classmates were going to be better than her in high school. And that's just the way it was. And everybody comes with the same backpacks, and they went to Europe. They traveled to this tournament in Florida. My daughter, I put her in a team here at Kiva, but it was sad. It wasn't the same thing. And we can compete with that.
I really want to. This is one of my dreams. Okay, so I would love to see an ICS club. It's just like if you're an ICS, you can just be part of the club.
Yeah, that's
it's. I mean, it's not going to be amazing because it's going to have to be run by like our coaches and stuff. But I think that could.
I
allow
think
for this.
A big reason we've seen that shift too is just there is that desire. Families and children want to learn these sports. We have, coaches who also might not fully understand the sport, but are eager to serve and volunteer in that way. So that's probably how that has happened over the years. But I will say, like, there is, like Pastor Marcio was saying, the kids know. They can tell the difference, in skill set. And it's not something, it's also something that they know and something you hear them say. They probably went to club. My parents can't afford club, And so, yeah, there's a reality of that. But then there's this, it's like, okay, so you can't go to this club, but like, what can you do on your, like encouraging our students to, again, be resourceful. And it's like, if you want this, you can also do it. You can get ahead. And educating parents too on the importance of, keeping routine, like working with families to like carpool and like, so trying to address some of those barriers is important. That's something that we do as a school as well. Like maybe, not the same parent is, one parent is driving that week to, these after school things that are outside of Lighthouse, or maybe we bring them to Lighthouse. So there's all those, layers to getting our kids prepared for sports at Lighthouse.
It's extra work.
We're coming. Yeah, we're coming to get you.
I think there are benefits. I think there are benefits. And like, I think for the most part, the major benefits of sports happen from like 5th to 8th grade. After that, you have to become a professional now. And I'm not sure that's what sports are even for, But like the whole like playing on a team together, having a camaraderie, trying to do a good job because what you do matters to the other players, listening to a coach, taking commands, respecting rules, going as hard as you can at something while still being conscious of the rules. Like basketball is the worst for that. Is like you're trying to attack somebody and then you can't touch them in 57 different ways. And it creates a lot of a mental activity with kids, and I think it can be really helpful.
Can I vent?
Yeah.
Okay. Since there's gonna be people that hype on it, others are gonna listen, and this goes also to the hype point, community. One thing though, when it comes to sports,
are we talking about the stands?
And especially in the minorities community, we're different culture, and we're different, and it's not about one being better than the other. That we're just different. Because what thing that has happened, for example, High Point, Lighthouse. Now, One City, a lot of these schools are in Maisel, which is where a lot of the private schools compete. We get so many complaints about Lighthouse being so loud.
The fans.
And I'll say this, Pastor Nick, we got even told at High Point that we were too loud and we couldn't be loud anymore. We were told about that. And but I want to say this because we're not loud because we're mean. That's our culture. So you're almost telling us who you are is not a good thing. So I think we need to understand as we're growing, there are more private schools that cater to African Americans and Hispanics, the way that we share, the way that we talk to our kids, the way that the coaches are is going to be different, not because we're mean or we're bad or it's a different culture.
That you brought it up. I was going to bring it up. So I'm glad you brought the stands up. I think one of the things that is important for us to understand, yes, culture, but also just a posture like of openness and like assuming the best of one another. There was a few, during basketball season, there were a few times, but the very last time, just a few, rows ahead, some parents were making, I feel like I cheer for my kids, but it was, I've never heard such aggressive cheering before. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm being aggressive. Like, what am I saying? And so I think as a Latina mom who actually is pretty introverted, but my kid's out there, she wants me to cheer for her, and I'm going out of my way to like make sure that she knows that I'm there, and then to be in the stands.
And your 7th grader is like a smaller girl in basketball.
Yes,
so
exactly.
She's like tearing. Like she got like hit in the head at our last game with them because she was like scrapping.
And then to be, to hear things like, oh, I've never heard such loud cheering before. I've never, that was really aggressive cheering. that's weird. It's a weird thing to hear as a parent, you know? And I would say to anyone listening, if something is different, it doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong or incorrect. And, you know, and if you're curious, it's, you know, it's more about maybe like saying hi to that person versus like making a comment like that. Because I would have loved to say, you know, for that person to turn around and say, oh my gosh, like you sound excited. And it's like, yeah, that's my kid. And we connect on that versus, you know, that undercurrent of like maybe some criticism or judgment, and you walk away feeling like, do I belong here?
Because this is
Stephanie, I'm gonna have to ask you to respect the Midwest white culture of passive aggressiveness, because this is who we are. I'm just kidding. No, I hate that.
Because you know, this is a thing. You know, we get so many emails, and I don't know if this happens to other schools, for example. We get emails about, you know, on Monday. Oh, thank you that your kids were so well behaved. And I'm thinking, did they think we're gonna steal from the concession stand, or like you know? But it's like that. Like it's like, you know, I want to just congratulate you and thank you. You're doing a good job because your kids were so well behaved. You know. And I'm thinking, what were they thinking we were going to do?
There are some, it would be fun to get some people together and talk about this, because there are some like cultural differences where stuff you're not allowed to do in some cultures is clearly okay in others. So like when I remember going to college. So I went to college, and where I went to college, it was about half New York City African Americans that were at my school. So I played pickup basketball, and the stuff some of these guys would say to me, I was just like, what? Like, are you? This is so mean. Like, because it was just like the culture of trash talking that they were from in New York City was like, you literally try to like emotionally abuse the people you're playing with. And that's part, and like if you like grow up with cutting up on each other, it's kind of fun. Like, but like when I was pastoring in the South with like almost all white people, there's a lot of cutting up on each other. But once you got in the flow of it, it didn't feel mean. It just felt like, this is how we talk, right? That's so like so our parents, I think, have had more trouble with some of the other schools. Where the parents will like kind of trash talk at the kids on the court.
And
you're like,
no, there's a difference, guys.
Or like threaten the referees. Or that sort of thing. And we're like, we probably shouldn't do that.
And
so what I tell our parents, is you need to be louder. When Lighthouse comes, don't tell them to be quiet.
That's so funny.
You just need to cheer louder.
Pastor Dick.
And then what I say is, okay, do not cheer when a kid makes a mistake. And we benefit from it. Cheer when a kid makes something happen.
Correct.
Because they're hustling, and when they do something good, it's okay to clap for them too.
Absolutely.
Right. So like there were times where like, you know, if your daughter dribbled the ball off her foot out of bounds, we would cheer, and I'd be like, don't cheer for that. This is 7th grade girl. She's gonna feel embarrassed. But if like your kid dives across the floor and knocks the ball away, and you guys get a steal, my gosh, you should cheer really loud for that, right? And we're not going to cheer because we're like, crap, my kid just got the ball stolen.
Agreed.
But you should be able to cheer for your kid when they hustle, when they do something that matters. That's the whole point of cheering. You know, and it's going to be louder than the Super Bowl because they're like our kids.
Of course.
And it's having an understanding that things are different anymore. You know, 10 years ago, private school, it was mostly white kids. Now it's not. So we need to understand that we're in a different times, and we need to be, you know,
But I agree with those boundaries that you were talking
there's
about.
Boundaries that we need.
And that's something that we, again, because we understand the culture, that's, I mean, like, just like you have a conversation with, you know, your people, we also do as well. It's like, hey guys, like, if we're going to cheer, let's cheer for the following and let's not do these things because we don't want to add to this weird narrative that, you know, sometimes people have.
Right. And also the funny thing is some of these sports, culturally, people play the sport totally differently.
Oh, yeah.
So like one city, they take the ball as hard as they can to the basket every single time.
Yeah.
And they either try to get a layup or they try to get a foul every single time.
Yeah.
None of the white schools run that offense. Because that slashing, like slapping, fouling, hitting is just, it's just, they don't, that's how they play basketball. And so then when our kids play against them, they're getting fouls called on them. They're just like it's almost like the rules are different because the game is so different. And so then they're like, wait, this is unfair. And then if they get more fouls called than usual on the one city kids, they're like, well, what's going on here? Like, this is how we play. And so there's styles of play, and then the parents are like, wait a second, that shouldn't be a foul, and people get hot, you know. And but what we tell our kids now is, because one city is recent, and of course they play pretty rough, and their fans are pretty loud. We go, listen, this is good for you. Like, what do you want? Nobody to touch you? This is a contact sport. Like,
Good.
You're gonna get you're gonna get beat up a little bit, and the ref's not gonna call everything. And you know what, life is like this actually.
Yeah.
And so
good.
and these girls are probably nice too. Like
Absolutely.
right.
And that's what it is. Because of how life is, sometimes it's like you're tough. You have to be tough at everything that you do, and and that's how we raise our children. You have to be tough, but.
Right, and especially like I coach girls mostly because I have mostly girls who played sports, and it's hard to teach them to be aggressive and to be tough and to go for the ball. And like we talk on our team, we talk about scoring fouls. You scored 3 fouls because you want them to be so aggressive that they're gonna get fouls called on them, right? And that's tough to do. And so our we were coaching our kids. We're like when we play Lighthouse is a little rougher. One season's a little rougher, and then what's the Catholic school? Well, they're all
St.
Catholic
James.
schools. Yeah, St. James, they're a little rougher. We're just like, this is good for you. And thank goodness with the voucher program too, our teams are getting more diverse as well.
Yeah.
That's like mixing the culture of our team a little bit, which is fun.
That's good.
So
But passionate cheering should always be.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We summarize really quick because I know Marcio has to
Yeah,
do
you
quick.
too.
Some of the needs that you guys stated, I just wanted to
that'd be great.
reiterate and ask some follow-up questions. You talked about giving rides like to Milwaukee.
Yeah.
Is there a way if someone is available from our church to be able to do some of that? Like who should they connect with?
Yeah, I would say they can connect with one of us for sure. Like if there's people who do that, just send us an email, and availability is helpful. Most of these appointments are during the day, as early as 8 or something like that. So that's important. So they can just get in contact with us directly.
And then speaking about funds, you talked about funds and how much it costs for immigration, like $5,000 per person, I think you mentioned. Do you have like a link on your website specifically for people who could donate to help with that?
So we do have a benevolence fund that we use, and people actually have to apply, for the funding, and we vet it, and we do that. And there are several churches actually that they is part of what they do. We actually did receive an email recently from High Point about your benevolence fund, so now we're actually sending them to High Point as well.
And if people want to give, you mean to Lighthouse? Yeah. If
like
people want to give,
specifically for immigration,
there's so there's not a specific, but there is a way to give online. But then again, we can.
It says benevolence.
Yeah,
if you click
it
where
says
you're going to give
benevolence.
to,
Okay.
it says benevolence, and we use it specifically for
Gotcha.
that.
So if you so click on benevolence, but I would also say like gas cards are really helpful too.
Yes.
So if you can donate gas cards, like that will help. If and then what is it?
But also,
actually, that's
and I'm going to put a pitch for another organization. The Care Portal.
Yeah.
We're doing. I don't know if High Point is doing it, but we're doing that with our partner church is Christ Church Madison.
Yeah.
And maybe Stephanie can say more about it. But every time we have a need about furniture, that's a big need, because sometimes we get housing for a lot of families, and we just put what type of furniture we need on Care Portal.
Yeah.
And Christ Church figures out how to get the furniture, and they bring it to the organizations.
Yeah.
So why don't you say more about that? Because that's a great thing.
You're saying care as in caring about somebody. Portal.
Care.
Portal?
Yeah. Care Portal is so Family Connect. And so this is a special partnership. So it's the only one like it in, I think, Wisconsin, or Dane County for sure. But it's our church partnering with Christ Church, and we use this online portal to put in these requests for different items, right? And so lately it's been a lot of furniture requests for people who find housing, but they don't have the means to get their own furniture. So we'll put in a request through the Care Portal. Christ Church is the only church that receives that request, and then they mobilize a team within Christ Church to get donations. So the opportunity there is to then link Christ Church with some High Point people who might have donations, furniture, or who might be able to purchase a new bed sheets or stuff like that. And so it would just be a matter of connecting that team lead with someone at High Point to make that happen.
But we can
as
even
well.
do something like that. We need someone to give a ride to someone. We can actually put that information in Care Portal, and someone from Christ Church might say, hey, we can help.
That's true.
Yeah, we'll look into that. I'll
And you
talk
do
to
not need to
Scott.
be bilingual in that regard. It's obviously preferable, but it's we have people on our team who can help facilitate that communication too.
Yeah.
So
Because what was very difficult before is I could call you, see if you have a mattress. Then I have to come and pick it up. And sometimes it was actually more work for us.
Yeah.
Right now, we just put it there, And they just called us and Pastor Marcio, thank you. My house is furnished. I
Yep.
don't even know who brought the furnish.
Yep.
So it's beautiful. And you know what has happened with this is that the family that receives the blessing invites the people from Christchurch and Lighthouse to have a dinner together or something, because it's like both of you help me. And it's a beautiful thing.
It's not like a mandatory thing, but people have done it just to show their gratitude, and it's been a beautiful thing. So
Yeah, that's great.
yeah.
Awesome. And then your guys' food pantry. Is there a location that we could drop food specifically for your food pantry?
Yeah, so you can drop it off at the Extended Hands Food Pantry is at the 6402 Schrader Road location, which is where Lighthouse
school
Christian
is
School
in
and
the-
the
in the
church
church,
is. You would just have to do it during their hours of operation. So Monday, Tuesday from
2 to 6.
2 to 6,
Friday
Friday
from
10 to 1, and then every last
Every last
Saturday
Saturday.
of the month.
Yeah.
All this information is available on our website too, though, if you need more information.
And you would be specifically looking for, you said you want to provide foods that are culturally significant. Are there specific items then that you are in most need of?
There is a list, and I can actually send you guys the list of the items that they need the most. But also you can bring used clothes,
Yeah.
coats, different things like that.
Yeah.
Diapers are always a big need over
Diapers,
there.
yeah, female hygiene products.
Female, yeah. So they'll take anything. Extended Hands will take pretty much everything.
And of course, donations.
Yes.
Monetary.
You guys, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
I
Thank
know
you
it took
for
a little
having
bit
us.
for us to schedule it. Yeah, it's our pleasure. And it's really helpful for our church to hear from you guys. And we have people people move away from Madison, but sometimes they still listen to this. We have people in Colorado and Texas and stuff that listen. So we're just glad that you could be here. Give us a little bit of perspective, especially that first half. But we're also so thankful for Lighthouse's partnership with us and also the school. And there wouldn't be an Impact Christian School without Lighthouse. And now Impact Christian Schools reaching dozens of schools throughout the state, which is really exciting. And that couldn't have happened without yours and Tia's vision and all the stuff you guys have done and us all coming together to work together for that, which is still bearing fruit, which I'm still really excited about. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.